to the Liberty Podcast with Clint Armitage. We are proclaiming liberty one show at a time, and the next one starts right now. What's up, everybody? Thanks for coming back. Clint Armitage, Liberty Podcast. We are now going to be wrapping up the parallel portion of the Dark Ages of America. So this is episode 5.2 of the Dark Ages of America. If you listen to 5.1, we didn't get to finish everything. We were just getting into the nitty-gritty of it all. And we really are going to get into what God really wants. And he wants the leadership of a country to be responsible for the direction of the country. And so this is where we're going to get that. This is where we're going to wrap it all up. And this is where we're going to kind of finish up the matching of the parallel or the pattern with ancient Israel and America, modern America to ancient Israel. Let's do this. Leadership is the key. Now, Jesus and even John the Baptist made it clear in the New Testament that the leaders are responsible and are going to be held accountable. If you notice, when you read through the New Testament, John the Baptist goes after the leaders. He doesn't go after the people. He goes after the leaders because they're leading him astray. You know, like he called the Pharisees a brood of vipers. And then Jesus also held accountable the leaders. He loved on the people, but when it came to the leaders, he was harsher with them, because the leaders lead people astray. Okay, and whenever the leaders take people away from God, lead people away from God, God doesn't like it. So again, Jesus and John the Baptist, made it clear that it's the leaders that are responsible, and they're going to be held accountable. But the people also have their own will, and they need to follow God and not follow these leaders that are doing things that they know are not right. And in the Old Testament, the prophets made clear in the Old Testament that the leaders are responsible. The prophets always went and proclaimed a prophecy against the leaders in the Old Testament. They held them accountable, like Elijah, right? He went to Ahab and he proclaimed prophetic messages and things that basically said Ahab and called him out that he was doing wrong. And that's because the leaders are who is going to be held accountable. The leaders are the ones that God does not want to be leading people. You're very accountable when you're a leader. Shoot, even Moses was subject to tough discipline when he misrepresented God to the nation, right? When he got angry and hit the rock and water came out. He didn't represent God the correct way, so God held him accountable. And he wasn't able to actually step foot into the promised land. So again, the leadership is where it's at. We have to focus on the leadership and make sure the leadership is not leading people down the wrong path or starting this apostasy and leading people towards idolatry, which is the pattern that Israel had, that the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom had, and then the people followed, and then the nation left God and were destroyed. So our nation's original leaders were our founding fathers. And one of America's first founding fathers was John Winthrop. Now, Winthrop actually made a covenant with God before arriving on the shores of Massachusetts Bay. And when he came to the New World, he came on a ship called the Arbella, 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 with 700 others. And this was around 1631, somewhere around there. And he said, we were to be a blessed nation in covenant with God. And they also prophesied America's place on the world stage, being a, quote, city on the hill, unquote. And that was from Jesus. Jesus said that in Matthew 5 during the Sermon on the Mount. But what Winthrop also quoted was Moses from Deuteronomy 30. He quoted verses 15 and 16 in regards to our covenant for our blessings and our responsibilities to uphold our end of the covenant with God in this new nation, because it was just being founded, and that was our founding fathers. So here's what he said. This is what he said. John Winthrop said this as he was giving this sermon before they arrived in the New World. He said, quote, "Beloved, There is now set before us life and death, good and evil, in that we are commanded this day to love the Lord our God and to love one another, to walk in his ways and to keep his commandments and his ordinance and his laws, and the articles of our covenant with him, that we may live and be multiplied, and that the Lord our God may bless us in the land whither we go to possess it." Unquote. Okay, so after that prophetic blessing, Winthrop actually gave a prophetic curse. He quoted verses 17 and 18 from the same chapter. This is what he said. He said, "But if our hearts shall turn away, so that we will not obey, but shall be seduced and worship other gods, our pleasures and our profits, and serve them, it is propounded unto us this day, we shall surely perish out of the good land whither we pass over this vast sea to possess it." Unquote. And again, that's verses 17 and 18 from Deuteronomy 30. Now, see, the full covenant and prophecy that Moses declared, it had blessings and curses. Now, it was based on whether or not Israel, in Moses' case, and America, in Winthrop's case, would honor God in the new land. The covenant and prophecy that was spoken by both of these men made it very, very clear that both nations and its prosperity, not just money I'm talking about here, but prosperity as a whole, because God is really our prosperity, right? But both America and Israel was contingent. These blessings were contingent on the sincere reverence and honor of God. Now, if you want to read about the blessings and curses that Moses proclaimed for Israel, take a read through Deuteronomy 28 through 30. All right, this brings us to where we're at and where we're headed. Now, are we as a nation going to continue this parallel with Israel? You know, I'm going to keep my eyes peeled right now for more division in this nation. In America, it looks like we're in stage 2 here. We're starting stage 2. We haven't fully split, but we're starting to split. If we see more division, that may be a sign of the parallel continuing with Israel. Now, just last year, there were politicians in Texas that submitted a bill that basically they wanted to secede from the Union. And here's a Newsweek article, dated June 20th. A Newsweek article. This is the title, okay? Texas could vote to secede from the U.S. in 2023 as GOP pushes for referendum. That's the title of the article. And also there's constituents in California that have also proposed a plan to split the state into 2. That hasn't become official yet. That hasn't totally happened yet. But there's talk about a proposed plan to split the state in 2. So, see, the signs of the parallel are here. But there's still time here. Now, there's still time to turn things around. God will always allow for us, a chance for to repent. And as a nation, as individuals, to turn back to him. Because he would rather see, us call on him, again, as individuals, as a nation, and change our ways than for him to have to disperse the judgment. But there's always a deadline, right? We always have to meet a deadline. There's going to be only a certain amount of time until God lays it out. So there is some urgency here. So as we look at the pattern for Israel, once the idolatry and rebellion really began to accelerate and it started to permeate and take over and move away, move God out of the public square and replace it with these idols, which is basically, again, child sacrifice, prosperity, and, and sexuality, that kind of stuff. When we see that starting to take over, we know we're going in the wrong direction, and God's, it's going to be real urgent because God's time is going to happen, and we can't control that, and we don't know when it is. So there is urgency here. And then when God acted in Israel, what he did was he used foreign nations to exact judgment, right? First, it was an internal nation suppose, a national split into the 2 kingdoms. And just like Jesus said, a house divided cannot stand. Once the nation splits, that's when a strong foreign nation, a foreign enemy, can come in and penetrate and begin to conquer just like they did Israel. So if we start to see that, that means America's getting weaker and weaker, and we're still heading in the wrong direction. So that's the information that I have for this right now. That's basically the wrap up of the Dark Ages in terms of the parallel. I'll have more when I talk about the future, the end times events and the last days events, and we'll go and see what it says in the Bible. What does the Bible say about the last days? And are we in them right now? So you have to decide whether or not you believe our nation, the United States of America right now, is in a parallel pattern with Israel, ancient Israel, and how they went into the Dark Ages. Is America coming into its own Dark Ages? Are we getting weaker as a nation? Is another foreign nation going to come in and conquer and take over? And as they permeate through, see, remember, the split happens because of an internal issue within the nation. And then it becomes weaker after that, which allows other stronger nations to start to look at us differently. Because America right now is the power of the world. We used to be the number one power, the number one economic power, the number one military power. We were number one. And the reason why we're number one is because we kept God more in the forefront, right? If you were to bring a guy that was in the 1950s, right after the World War there, you bring a person from the 1950s and you show him what is now in the public square available to anybody in the 2020s, he's going to go, this is the end of the world. He's going to go, it's the last days, because of the accelerated rate, the difference between how we were and how our attitude was with God back then and how it is now. Before, when you were going to do evil, you were going to do it in secret. When you were going to do something against God, you were not going to make it public. You were going to hide it. All those sins were hidden. Now, it is out for everyone to see. As a matter of fact, people are celebrating their sin. They're celebrating the fact that they are moving away from God, that they are shunning God, that they are not godly people because they don't want to be accountable. They don't want to be accountable to God. They don't want anything to do with God. That's what we saw in the northern kingdom of Israel. Are we seeing that now in America? Are we at the point where we have moved God out of the public square and then moved in idol worship that includes sexuality, that includes child sacrifice, that includes prosperity and materialism? To me, it's pretty clear. We have a lot of sexual, negativity and promiscuity and sexuality that is just rampant, and you can get it anywhere at any time, any place. That wasn't possible before, but now we've made it so easy, and we made it okay. We made it okay to do that in the public square. You can basically do what you want in the public square, and it's not a big deal, even though it's against God's laws, even though it's against God's ways. We'll do it in the face of God, and that is our issue. Child sacrifice. We have abortion going rampant. Millions and millions and millions of innocent lives have been taken over the years. Yes, there is variables, but it doesn't answer for the fact that there are more millions of babies that die because someone doesn't want to have the baby. That's the only reason. They don't want to have the baby because they want to have what? A better financial future. Again, going back to that prosperity thing, the pagan god of prosperity. And we're sacrificing our children for that reason. That's where it's at. That's what we're looking at right now. And so we have to make a stand. We have to speak out. We have to start changing our ways. We have to start helping people understand that it doesn't end well. It ends in destruction. But God is a loving God, and He'll wait to the last second if we turn around as a nation. I'm going to read it again like I have in other podcasts. 2 Chronicles, chapter 7, Verse 14, if my people who are called by my name shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear their prayer from heaven, and I will forgive their sin, and I will heal their land. We need to come back to that. We really need to come back to that. All right, Christian, that's it for this episode. I'm Clint Armitage. This is the Liberty Podcast. You make your decision. Do your own research. Figure out if you see the same things that I do. Until next time, stay safe, stay motivated, and keep seeking liberty. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Liberty Podcast with Clint Armitage. If you want to get in touch, email us at info@clintarmitage.com.